Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make a super simple strawberry lollipop. Now, I know a lot of people get really nervous or scared or think, oh my gosh, a lollipop, how do you even make that? And I know when I started making lollipops, I was nervous to be handling molten hot sugar, but I promise it's really, really easy. It's so simple, and as soon as you learn how to make a really basic lollipop, you're gonna be hooked. Okay, so the first thing you need to know about lollipops is all of the ingredients get measured out. So right here, you can't really see it, but I've got my food scale. And what I'm gonna do is take my pot and set it on the scale and turn it on. And that's gonna bring it to 0. So then what I'm gonna do is put my ingredients directly into the pot. So the first ingredient in lollipops is glucose or corn syrup. Now, when I'm making lollipops at the shop at Fiddlestix, I don't use corn syrup. We use a non-GMO glucose that does not contain corn, so we're not using corn syrup, but this is the easiest thing to find if you're looking for your ingredients at the grocery store or at a craft store. You might find glucose that's in a little tub, but today we're gonna use corn syrup. And so what we're gonna do is pour this corn syrup directly in the pot, and we are looking for 200 grams of corn syrup or glucose. So I'm just watching it go up. Okay, so we've got 200 grams of glucose or corn syrup in the pot. So we're gonna tare this back to 0. And then our next ingredient that's going in is pure cane sugar. And so we're gonna put in 300 grams of sugar on top of our glucose. So that's 300 grams. And then the last ingredient in our lollipops is just water. So I'm gonna do 112 grams of water onto this. So the key with the water is to pour it in really carefully so it doesn't splash your ingredients, your sugar anywhere. As long as you don't get sugar granules splashed up onto the side, you're good to go. You don't have to touch this again. So what we're gonna do is move this onto a cooktop and turn on the heat and let it go. Okay, so we've got our ingredients onto the cooktop. I'm turning this on. And so we're just gonna let this go. We're gonna let it come to a boil. You do not stir lollipop syrup. So at this point, everything is meshing well. We're just gonna leave it alone. That's probably the hardest part and also the easiest part of making lollipops. Just don't touch it. I know it's so tempting to stir it. So once this comes to a boil, normally I would put in my candy thermometer. But today I forgot my candy thermometer at the Fiddlestix Candy Kitchen. You don't have a candy thermometer hanging around. You might have one of these. This is a thermal thermometer. It's one of those things that you can like point at the wall and see what the temperature is. So this works for candy as well. So you can just point it right at your syrup and it's gonna tell you what the temperature is. So that's really important when making lollipops because you're going to want your lollipop syrup to come to 305 degrees or about 310. So on your candy thermometer, typically it'll show you the hard crack temperature, and that's what you really want when you're making lollipops. So once this comes to a boil, if you've got a candy thermometer, you're gonna put it in there because everything will be bubbling up nice and beautiful. So while this is boiling, I wanted to share with you how we're going to add our strawberry flavor into the lollipop syrup. So you basically have 3 options. My personal favorite way to flavor lollipops is using a really good jam from a local jam maker. So if you've got somebody in your town that makes really super yummy jam, go to them first because their flavor is going to turn up in your lollipop the best. Now, if you don't have that handy, like I don't today, your next best bet is to use a flavor emulsion. This can be found in the baking section of any craft store. You'll see on the front it says Bakery Emulsion. This is a Lorian Gourmet brand. Now your third option, if you don't have an emulsion handy or you don't want to use an emulsion, your last option is to use these tiny little candy oils. It's from the same company, Lorian, and it's just a strawberry flavor oil. So the biggest difference with the oil versus the jam or the emulsion is when you're going to add it to your lollipop syrup. So if you're using a jam or an emulsion, you're gonna watch the temperature on your lollipop syrup, and when it gets to 290 degrees, that's when you're gonna add your flavoring in. If you're using the oil like this, you're gonna wait till it comes to the hard crack stage, about 305 degrees or so, and you're gonna pull it from the heat and then you're gonna add in your oil. So the reason we do that is because the emulsion and the jam has some extra water that's gonna need to cook off, whereas the oil doesn't. Okay, so while our lollipop syrup is boiling, remember we're not touching it, we're gonna go ahead and prep our lollipop molds. So you can find molds at any local craft store. Sometimes they'll be silicone like this one, that's my favorite, or sometimes they'll be those white plastic molds. Either way, it'll work, no big deal. But if you've got a plastic mold, you're gonna have to spray a little bit of non-stick cooking spray on it. If you're using silicone, it'll pop out really nice and easy, no big deal. So what I like to do is take a small baking sheet about this size and I put my lollipop mold on top of it, because when we're pouring our lollipop syrup into the molds, we're gonna wanna tap it to get all the bubbles out, and the easiest way to do that with these silicone molds is to have a baking sheet underneath. So we're pretty much ready. If we were gonna put any sprinkles in our lollipops, we might put some sprinkles in now before we start pouring. And then otherwise, all we have to do is put our sticks in. So we're gonna prep our sticks into our molds, and I put the top of the stick about halfway into the middle of the lollipop shape. And we're just using a basic 2-inch lollipop today. So that's it, we're ready. So as soon as that syrup is done boiling, we can go ahead and start pouring our strawberry lollipops into the molds. Oh, one last thing. So one last tool that you're gonna need for pouring your lollipops is a good glass measuring cup with a handle and a pour spout. This makes it really easy to pour your lollipops and also reheat the syrup if it starts to get cooled down too quickly. So make sure you have one of these handy, and a little spatula would be super handy as well. All right, so our lollipop syrup just came off of the stove top, so it's still bubbling. I'm gonna go ahead and pour in my oil, my flavoring oil. And you've got to be careful when you do this, because sometimes it lets off a bit of steam and you can see it rising, or you might be able to, and some fumes with it. So kind of keep your face away, and I'm just stirring it in. Remember, we didn't stir anything up until now. Don't stir the syrup until you add in the flavor. And so I'm just going to stir it and let the steam roll off, and keep going until all the bubbling stops. All right, so our lollipop syrup stopped bubbling. All of the flavor is mixed in really well. Now I want you to remember, this is molten sugar. It is so hot. It looks really not scary, but it is really hot. Believe me, trust me, I've accidentally burnt myself several times with lollipop syrup, and it hurts. It is over 300 degrees, so it's basically like sticking your hand in an oven that's liquid. So just be careful, don't let your kids do this part. We're gonna be super careful, but we're going to transfer the syrup, the lollipop syrup, from inside of this pot into our really helpful pouring measuring cup. So we're gonna do that now. So here's the thing about lollipop syrup. It's sticky, it's sugar, it's gonna make all these little strings, it's gonna be messy. You've just gotta embrace the mess. I feel like that's good life advice in general. Just embrace the mess, just go with it. You're gonna make a mess, but it's actually surprisingly easy to clean up. And as long as you take your empty pot and put it right into the sink with some water on it, it'll actually be really simple to wash out, as long as you get water on it before it starts to harden. Okay, so at this point, if you were gonna add any coloring to your lollipop syrup, you're gonna wanna do it right now. I'm not planning to add any extra coloring. I just kinda like it when it's the natural color, but it's fun to play with color too. So if you're gonna add color, you wanna use gel food coloring, not regular food coloring, because it's water-based. Gel food coloring will mix in better. You only need a teeny tiny bit. A little bit goes a long way with the color and the lollipop syrup. So you would add that now, mix it up with a small spatula, or a little popsicle stick would work really well. But for us, we're ready to pour our super simple strawberry lollipop. So we've got our mold, we've got our sticks in there, we've got our syrup here. We're just gonna start pouring. I like to use a spatula to kind of balance my measuring cup, and we're just going to pour very carefully into each mold. let the syrup come up over the top of the lollipop stick. I'll probably just have you fast forward this part. And I might not pour all of it. I'm just gonna do 3. Okay, and then do a few taps to make sure that all the air bubbles come out. Okay, so our strawberry lollipops, we let them sit for about 30 minutes. They're totally cool, so if we touch them, they're definitely cool. And so now it's just time to take them out of the mold. It's one of my favorite parts. So all we do is gently lift and pull them out of the mold, and you have yourself a lollipop. Now you could get really fun and creative and maybe put on a little freeze-dried lollipop on top of this to give it, or I'm sorry, a freeze-dried strawberry on top to kind of let your guests know it's a strawberry. You could add all sorts of sprinkles or colors or anything, but this is just your basic strawberry lollipop. Remember, if you used jam or even the emulsion, typically there is some color that would come through, so you might have a little bit more pink or red. Definitely if you use jam, it'll look way more like strawberry, but there you go. You've got your hard candy lollipops.